I saw in an alley a little metallic blue car. And so we went up and had a look. Suddenly we hear a voice. "Can I help you, pal?" And he was very tall and he had a big Doberman dog on a leash. I think everyone knows someone who is, you know, a bit of a larger than life or colourful character. Someone who you can tell endless stories about. Someone who was like that was my dad. Now, every now and then, my dad reminded me slightly of Del Boy, if Del Boy were honest. For those who either don't live in the UK or do live in the UK and are too young to remember, there was a sitcom called Only Fools and Horses that ran from the early 80s until the early 90s, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And it was about a guy called Derek Trotter, or Del Boy, and his brother Rodney. And there were other characters as well, but it was mainly about those two. And lots of the episodes focused on Derek's get-rich-quick schemes, which were always harebrained. And, you know, the episode would be how his harebrained schemes would fall apart, hijinks, shenanigans, etc. And, you know, everyone would laugh, and that was your episode. It was more than that, but that was basically it. But the thing is, Derek was a crook. He would lie, cheat and steal in order to achieve his aims. My dad was the opposite. He was very honest and very trusting, sometimes to a fault. To give you an example, once he bought a navy blue British Leyland Sherpa. I think it's an LDV, I'm not sure, but anyway, it's a Sherpa van. And he bought it on a handshake because he's from a generation where your word is your bond. You know, it's a verbal contract, but it's a contract nonetheless. And it was nicked. And one day we were driving around southeast London, and I looked out the window and said, "Dad, isn't that our van?" And it was. And he went to like this warehouse, and there were these guys sitting there. They're all these Jewish gentlemen, Orthodox Jewish gentlemen, you know, those big hats and curly hair. And it seemed that they had bought the van the same way that my dad had, i.e. with a handshake. So basically they told you, you know, what are we going to do? You know, you say it's yours, but you've got no documents to prove it. And if my dad was dishonest, he would have stolen the van back or something, because, you know, they had no documents, certainly not. And but he didn't. He just, you know, like, oh, people these days, and we left it. He was very annoyed, but that was that. But where my dad was akin to Del Boy was his silver tongue. I mean, he could convince people to do all sorts of stuff for him, but perhaps most relevantly, he could also talk his way out of many a tricky situation. The other thing was that he also had, it wasn't get-rich-quick schemes like Del Boy, but it was save money schemes. And sometimes they went hilariously wrong. For example, once he had the idea of, instead of going to the barber and giving a man who's trained to cut hair money to cut hair, he got my sister to do it for him. My sister was very young. She was like 14 or 15 at the time. Zero experience cutting hair, I should point out. Never done it before in her life. And basically my dad ordered her to cut his hair, gave her the precise directions as to how to cut, you know, here, there. And my sister was like, "Dad, are you sure?" And of course my dad, "Yes, do it." And she did it, and it looked awful. He looked like, I don't know, he looked like he bought an ill-fitting wig. It really looked terribly bad. And my mum, who is the calmest person in the world, she has the patience of a saint. She saw that haircut and she just went, you know, she was really cross and told my dad, you know, "Spend the money, get a proper haircut. You can't go around looking like that." So my dad did go and get the haircut. So there's no nice way of saying it. My dad was a bit of a cheapskate, and this attitude also was reflected in the way he approached cars. So, for example, my dad's favourite car by quite a margin was definitely the Citroën CX. He had 11 of them, all Series 1s, although many of them were parts cars, it has to be said. One of the most common engines you could get, I think, was the 2.2 litre petrol. I think there was a 2.4 litre, but it doesn't matter. He would get all of these 2.2 litre petrols, and they'd get terrible mileage, like 17 mpg, which is this amount you see here. And diesel was far more economical, and, you know, you could get 35 mpg on a diesel. At least that's what he said. That's what he told one of his friends who had a petrol CX. What he'd do, he'd get your petrol CX. It was always, except for a couple of them, they were always Safaris, the big ones. He only got one Familial in the whole time, the 7-seater, 8-seater, 7-seater, sorry. but I'm going all over the place here. He'd get a cheap petrol CX, because they were a lot cheaper on the second-hand market than diesel ones were. And then he'd get the engine from some written-off CX. There's always this 2.5 litre unit with about 65 horsepower. Not very powerful, but that doesn't matter. That wasn't what mattered. What mattered was getting a high MPG figure, a good average. And he'd put the engine in the petrol. Well, obviously, he'd take the petrol engine out first and put the diesel one in. And he'd do this swaps the whole time, and I helped him a couple of times. Sometimes it went well, sometimes not so much, because he wasn't a trained mechanic. Although he was very good at that, though. In all honesty, he probably should have opened his own mechanic shop, but that's a completely different kettle of fish. Anyway, CXs were really his thing, but he did make an exception one day, and it was by pure chance. Now, my dad had no particular fondness for diesel, but he did like the fact that it allowed him to drive a big fat Citroën CX without huge fuel bills. But he was always on the lookout to see, if there was any other car that he could get for like little money and run it for little money. Doesn't matter if it was diesel, petrol, whatever. And so this is what happened. One day we were going home. I think it was from church. It was a Sunday morning. It was chilly because I remember I was all buttoned up. And I saw in an alley a little metallic blue car. It was a pig-nosed Citroën Visa. And so we went up and had a look, peeked inside, poked around. Suddenly we hear a voice. "Can I help you, pal?" And so we looked around, and there was this couple coming towards us, a man and I think it was his girlfriend. He was very tall, gaunt, and he had this leather jacket, and he had a big Doberman dog on a leash. And this is where my dad's silver tongue came into play, because he was completely charming. He said, "Yes, hello. Yes, I'd like to know if this car's for sale." And the guy's demeanour changed completely. "Oh, you can have it, mate. You can have it. I want to get rid of it." So I think he had like a Mark 1 Escort already, and he just wanted to get rid of the car. So basically my dad had a chat, trying to find out what was wrong with the car. A couple of days later, he managed to convince a friend to give up her free time and also use her car, which was a big Peugeot 505 Estate, to tow the Visa home. Not only that, when we got home, he managed to convince our next door neighbours, the Malicks, to park the Visa on their driveway. And of course it stayed there for weeks. But the Malicks were used to my dad's shenanigans. But yeah, my dad got the Visa home, got it into the neighbour's driveway, fixed it up. I don't know what was wrong with it. I think it had a flat battery, some odd mechanical issue. And I think, now this I might be misremembering, but it had a slow puncture. I do remember that my dad was fiddling around with the tyres, and it involved filling one of the tyres with foam. I remember that very well. Why is that? Because I was sitting at home, suddenly we hear this bang, run outside, and my dad is covered head to toe in foam, except for his shin for some reason. He looked like the Michelin Man. Oh my God, he was just like, "Go get your mum." And so, I ran inside, got my mum. Yeah, I don't know what went on there. But he got the Visa running. Lovely little thing. It was very comfortable. It was actually rather refined. I don't know, maybe because the engine sound didn't bother me. I loved the engine sound. It was the same as a 2CV. And it was incredibly comfortable with his soft squidgy seats and very practical and all that stuff. And this might seem weird. It's going to sound weird for especially younger folk, even probably older folk, people my age or older. But back in the 80s, I remember this perfectly well, some cars didn't have reverse lights or fog lights. And sometimes either had one or the other, or sometimes had like a reverse light on one side and the fog light on the other. I'll illustrate it here so you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe it's just like I thought it was bling because it was shiny, but I found the Visa to be really luxurious because it had a pair of reverse lights and a pair of fog lights. I mean, how swanky is that? I don't know if anyone can relate to that or if it's me that's just weird. Probably the latter is the most true. So yeah, we went round in the Visa for quite a while, and I think my dad liked it so much he got a second Visa, and I think he got that one for 50 quid. By the way, the first Visa, the guy said he could have it for free, but my dad gave him a tenner anyway. Again, he was very honest, he was very trusting, and also, he felt it was the right thing to do. Del Boy would not have given the man a tenner, certainly. He bought this copper-coloured Visa for 50 quid, I think, if I'm not misremembering, and we went round in that as well. But the Visa phase came to an end. So we eventually got another CX, which was our last CX. It was a beautiful green metallic one that we nicknamed Gizmo. And that was the car that actually brought us to Portugal. with all our stuff. But the Visa, the last Visa had a sticky end. I think he sold the blue Visa for some money, you know, even if it was like 50 quid, that would have paid for the battery and the new tyre and the tenner that he gave the guy for the car. But the copper coloured Visa was not sold. The story was, we went on holiday, and when we came back, the Visa was gone. It was gone from where my dad had parked it. And the thing is, it was sort of like dubious if where my dad parked it was legal or not. And it had been towed. And because my dad hadn't gone to collect it, it had been crushed. So my dad was very annoyed with this. And I remember helping him write a letter. I think it was to the council, I'm not sure. But it was to whoever, you know, towed the car. And he wanted compensation, obviously. I think he asked for 115, they gave him 110. But, you know, the car cost 50 quid. So again, like, my dad was in the black. It was fine. So yeah, that was the end of the Visa phase. And it wasn't the last time my dad had an adventure with a small car. That was the Citroën AX after that. But that can be a story for another day. So that's the story of the time that my dad decided to dabble in owning Citroën Visas. Didn't go according to plan because, of course, you know, a Citroën Visa and a Citroën CX, they're rather different. You know, within Citroën's range, I think they were like the two extremes for a time. But that's my dad for you. Very, very strange shenanigans that he got up to try and save money. And I was reminded of this story, first off, because tomorrow's the 20th anniversary of his passing. So I do think a lot about him around this time of year. And also because I saw a very charming review on a pig-nosed yellow Citroën Visa from Morsels and Motors. A lovely video. I do recommend you go and see it. And maybe this will be the first of other stories that I'll tell about my dad. We'll see how this video does. If people are interested in listening to them, then I'll tell more. So actually, I do think they are entertaining. I'm not the best storyteller. I'm no Richard Kitch, but I do try my best. For those who don't know, Richard Kitch of Up and Down fame. Amazing storyteller. By pure coincidence, he also has like a love for Citroëns. Coincidence, nothing more. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to leave it here. So thanks very much for watching if you made it this far. And have a happy Christmas for those who celebrate it. Happy holidays for everyone else. And a happy New Year. Don't know if I'm going to post anything before then. Here are some other videos on screen if you want to watch something else. I don't know, maybe something will suit your fancy. But either way, I thank you again for watching and I bid you all farewell.